In this piano tutorial, I want to share a progression that we can use at the end of a song, right? Specifically if it's in a major key. Usually when we're playing the end of a song, we tend to, as pianists, just end the song on the chord, right? And sometimes we may want to switch it up a bit, give it a different type of ending. So this progression that I'm going to share with you guys is very useful for that. And I'm going to start off with the most basic way of playing this progression, and I'll also use a song as an example. That way you can understand it within the context of the song. So we're going to be in the key of C major. And the progression sounds something like this, right? It starts off on the 4, and I want you guys to pay attention mostly to the voicings that we use for these chords, right? I feel like that's the most important part. So we start off on the 4, and it sounds something like this. Right, so it's a couple of chords. We started off on the 4, but as you can see, it's in a drop 2 voicing, right? It's a little bit more open. We're playing the root note, the 5th, which would be C, and then the 3rd up here. But then you're going to notice that I'm also playing a melody that sort of pedals off of this C, right? We're sort of maintaining this C throughout the whole progression, right? So we started off playing this chord, then we went down to this chord, which is actually a 1, right? It's a 1 over 3 technically, right? Again, the voicing is completely different than something we may be used to. We're starting off with the 3, then the root note, and then the 5th, right? That gives us this different inversion or different voicing for C major, and we're still maintaining this note up here as a pedal point. And then we go to the 2, but this 2 is slightly different, right? Usually when we play a 2 within the major scale, it would be a minor 2, right? But in this case, we're going to make it major, and we're actually going to voice it like this, right? As a D major, sort of a drop 2 voicing, where we have the root, the 5th, and the 10th or the 3rd, right, up here. But then remember that we're still maintaining this note up here, right, this C. And as you can see, by adding this C to this chord, we get a dominant sound, right? We get that D7 sound. And the next chord, right, since we have this dominant sound, usually when we play a dominant chord, it tends to want to resolve itself to its 4th, right? So the 4th of D would be G, right? So the next chord is actually going to be a G, but we're not going to play a simple G major. We're actually going to make it sus, right? We're going to play it like this, right? A G7 sus. Now, how do we form this chord? Again, we're still maintaining the C up here, but we actually have the root note, the 5th, and the minor 7th, which gives it that dominant 7th sound. But we're going to add the C up here, which is actually going to give it a sus sound, right? Because we don't have the 3, which would define it as a major chord. We're actually substituting the 3 for the 4, which is C in this case. That gives us this suspended sound, and then we resolve it to this C major, which I have voiced as a 1, or the root, the 5th, the 10th, and then the 1 again up here. So once again, right, and we finish on the 1. And a song that uses this exact progression, right, is Goodness of God, right? It's in the part that says, and I will sing of the goodness of God, right? That's a simple 4-5-1 progression. And I will sing of the goodness of God. But instead of playing this progression to end the song, we can actually substitute it for the one that I just shared, right? And I will sing of the goodness of God. And then we finish the song, okay? Now, there's actually a different way to play this exact same progression. It includes a little bit more notes, but it gives us a different option for the same ending progression, okay? And it actually sounds something like this, okay? It's very similar in the beginning, but some of the chords are going to change. So I'll play it once more. Right, now this progression, like I said, is very similar. We started off on the same 4 chord. Right, in this case, I decided to add a grace note just to spice it up a little bit, going from G to A, right? We're still using the C as a pedal point. Then we went down to the 3, or the 1/3, same chord, C over E. But then for the 2, we're actually changing it up a little bit, right? Before we played this D7, but in this case, we're actually going to play a D9. But the way that I approach it is by starting off on this A and going down chromatically, right? Chromatically down all the way to F sharp, right? We're just going down by half steps. And then from here, we're actually going to form the D9 chord by playing these notes, right? A, C, and E. And as you can see, this chord is sort of a combination. You can think about it in many different ways, right? You can think about it as a D with this 5th, and on the right hand, I'm simply playing an F sharp half diminished, or an F sharp minor 7 flat 5. Or you can think about it as a D major with an A minor up top, right? As you can see, A, C, and E is an A minor. And that gives us that D9 sound, right? It's still a dominant chord. It's still functioning as a dominant chord, but we have added the 9th up here, which is E, right? E is the 9th or 2nd of D. So the progression again sounds. Then for the 5 chord, right, before we were playing this G7 sus4, but in this case we're switching it up and playing a G7 sus2 chord. Now this chord right here, very easy to memorize, right? We're simply playing a G in our bass or our left hand, and our right hand is going to play a D minor, right? It's a different option that we can have to substitute 5 chords, right? So far we have a regular 5 chord. We also have a G7 sus4. We can also have a G7 sus2, or even a G9 sus4, right? Different options for that 5 chord. And then the 1 we can simply finish on a C major. So once again, so that section right there going from the 2 is the part that switches up a little bit for the progression, okay? So let's see how it fits within the song. And I will sing of the goodness of God, and I will sing of the goodness of God. Okay, now let's actually do one more variation to this same exact progression, right? It's a little bit different. Maybe the melody might change a little bit, right? Instead of using C as the pedal point, we're actually going to use B and C as the pedal point, right? We're going to refer back to those 2 notes, and it sounds something like this, okay? We start off on the 4. Right, so what did I do there? We started off on the 4, but in this case I'm voicing it as an F major. A little bit more notes, right? Still an F major. Then I play B and C as sort of a bridge to bridge that gap in between the chords, okay? So then I come down to the C over E, right? It's basically a different voicing for the one we used before, right? Then we go back to that B and E to get to the 2 chord, but in this case, different than the other progression that we did in the beginning, the first two, we're actually going to keep it minor in this case, right? So, and then from here we have the option of just simply going to the 5. In this case, I'm voicing it as a G9 sus4 chord, right? A different option. And then finishing off on the C. But we also have the option of repeating that same B to C melody after the 2, right? So for example, and then finishing off on that G9 sus4, and then ending the progression on the 1. So let's see how this sounds within the context, okay? And I will sing of the goodness of God. Right, so hopefully you're able to capture something from this lesson. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, remember to subscribe to keep getting these lessons. And if you have any suggestions as well, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.